let's talk about people. Ibrahim alayhi salam, this story that is quite common, it's very widespread. Um, the story of the sacrifice or the attempted sacrifice of the son of Ibrahim alayhi salam, whether it was Isaac, whether it was Ishmael, Ishaq, or Ismail, whoever, but the child sacrificing the son. Now, what does the Quran say about this? Do we in Islam believe that this commandment came from God? It's my chopper, people. Bring it in, bring it in. Your commando. So, this, right, focusing on the question. This commandment did not come from God. Okay, now, unfortunately, it is widespread that it came from God. And I'll explain why people think that, but let's first of all just look at the Quran that addresses this issue from a purely Quranic Islamic perspective. So I understand what we're going to say in the Judeo-Christian tradition, but before one looks at that, just looking at the Quran. Okay, so you have got, people, one of the popular instances that is brought forward, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, is in Surah Safat, and people present this often. This is the popular verse where Ibrahim alayhi salam, it's speaking about Ibrahim alayhi salam, where he says that it mentions him becoming devoted to Allah, going off, and it mentions about his child, doesn't mention who the child is. فَلَمَّا بَلَغَ مَعَهُ السَّعْيِ قَالَ يَا بُنَيَّ إِنِّي أَرَى فِي الْمَنَامِ. Now he addresses his child, his son. He says, Ya bunay, oh, a small son, a beloved son, inni ara fil manami anni azbahuk. I see in a dream that I am sacrificing you. And you can tell that Ibrahim alayhi salam is incredibly disturbed by what he's seen. He's troubled. He's confused about what does this mean? Is this because he's of the assumption as well that prophets do receive revelation in their dreams as well? So he's got that notion and he's thinking, what does this mean? So he asks the child, what do you think? He says that, فانظر ماذا ترى, what do you see? What do you think about this? قال يا أبت افعل ما تؤمر. Now, the son here seems to convince him that this is a commandment and you need to act out this instruction. ستجدني إن شاء الله من الصابرين. You will find me amongst those who are patient. Now, you see, this is not something you have to we'll come back to the verse. You have to understand that where does this notion come from? This notion is not something that is unique, like all of a sudden it's just Ibrahim alayhi salam one day has this understanding. You will see that the Near East, the Middle East, that region of Canaan, that region of what would have been ancient Mesopotamia, all of these places would have had as a widespread practice. They would have had human sacrifices. So now you will see, and this was just a paper as an example. And you've got another one here. This was an essay done on the whole thing. Now, the reason I'd just like to share with you some of these things is for you to understand that this was a widespread practice. And it carried right throughout the centuries, that people would make offerings to particular gods. I mean, this is Moloch, which is actually shares the similar roots with the Arabic Malik. or milk, king as well, mulk, which comes from there as well. Now, you would have sacrifices were ritually made to certain gods, including Moloch, including Baal, who is one of the gods that you will see sacrifices were made traditionally to these gods. And I'm sharing this just so you get an idea. And you can see even in the Bible, it speaks of other incidents as well. You've got Jephthah, who sacrifices his daughter. I mean, that's astaghfirullah. That's just like one of the absolute craziest, seriously craziest notions. So those of you that are not familiar with it, what you had was you have this incident where Jephthah has gone out on a military campaign, and he prays that if God grants him victory, he will sacrifice the first person that he sees on his return. Acha. No, don't ask that person. Just you make all the executive decisions. So Jephthah says, I will sacrifice the first person I see. And lo and behold, as he's victorious and returning home in the Bible, it mentions, I believe is it in right, I think that might actually be in Judges, but it's also another sacrifice is mentioned in Jeremiah as well. But along comes his daughter running to see her father because the father is victorious, he's returned from war. So lo and behold, people, what does the father do? He sacrifices the daughter. Your intelligence, huh? So these things that you can see were practices that used to happen. Now, it's important to know this because this will give you the kind of context to what is going on in that day and age. So in that whole surrounding in that region of Canaan, in ancient Mesopotamia, prior to that, they had these sacrifices where people would often sacrifice the firstborn. So it's when Ibrahim alayhi salam is there, he's aware of this in the culture. It's like if you're part of a culture, even if it's not your original culture, but you see that this is what people do, and sometimes it can play on your mind, on the subconscious, and therefore manifest in your dreams. So Ibrahim alayhi salam has this dream. Now, in the dream, he sees that he is sacrificing his son. So let's now go back to the verse. فَلَمَّا أَسْلَمَ وَتَلَّهُ لِلْجَبِينِ. So here, and it's interesting, by the way, the Quran demonstrates it as with a knife, although ancient kind of biblical versions are slightly confused on it. Some portray them as sacrificing with fire, the binding, and then you set a light. And some do go towards the knife version as well. So let's go with how it is in the Quran, that he lays him out and he's preparing him. وَنَادَيْنَاهُ أَنْ يَا إِبْرَاهِيمُ. And Allah shows that from his divine intervention, Allah calls out to, as in he hears. Obviously, it's not a physical voice, but he hears that Allah has addressed him. That قَدْ صَدَّقْتَ الرُّؤْيَا إِنَّا كَذَلِكَ نَجْزِي الْمُحْسِنِينَ إِنَّ هَذَا لَهُوَ الْبَلَاءُ الْمُبِينُ وَفَدَيْنَاهُ بِذِبْحٍ عَظِيمٍ. So Allah mentions that, look, we understand that Allah saying that you had a dream and you saddaqta, you carried it out. You were truthful to what you saw. Yeah. Allah does not say we showed you that dream. He says, Inna kathalika najzil muhsinin. What does this mean? So some people thought here this meant, oh, you're being pious by doing this. No, this meant that yes, you muhsin, you are a person of ihsan. That is clearly known in the Quran. Abraham was. This is how we save them, how we reward them by saving them from such a calamity. that you would have ended up sacrificing, murdering your son. So we rewarded you by saving you from doing this. That inna hadha lahu al-bala'ul mubin. Now this being a test, you see, people said, oh, this must have been from God. That's why God said, inna hadha lahu al-bala'ul mubin. That this, as you see in verse that's 106, inna hadha lahu al-bala'ul mubin. So in verse 106, Allah is saying that. So people assume that, oh, well, if it's a test, or this is a trial, this is a calamity, like a testing calamity. So obviously it's from God. But Allah didn't say it was from Him. He said this, but what was the this that Allah is speaking about? The this was that you saw a dream and felt that you had to act out in accordance with it. This was indeed testing. It's a testing calamity for people. So not that God had sent it as a test, but this was a testing calamity. وَفَدَيْنَاهُ. You see, now it's interesting. Fida is like where you atone and you rescue someone. We rescued the to be sacrificed son بِذِبْحٍ عَظِيمٍ. And we said, sacrifice a ram, if that's what you're going to sacrifice. And let it be known from here forth that nobody should ever be conducting these kind of sacrifices, human sacrifices. Okay, so that's the actual interpretation. And you can see here as well, this is Tafsir al-Sam'ani, where he is mentioning that he's got, let me just bring this one. I have this. Right, so here he mentions, وَاخْتَلَفُوا, وَقَالَ يَا بُنَيَّ إِنِّي أَرَى فِي الْمَنَامِ أَنِّي أَذْبَحُكَ, that the verse which we translated. He says, أُمِرْتُ بِذَبْحِكَ, that I've been commanded. That's one understanding of it. But he mentions, Ibn Abbas says that رُؤْيَا الْأَنْبِيَاءَ وَحْيًا, and this is why he thinks that. وَيُقَالْ, and it's said that رَأَيْتُ فِي الْمَنَامِ مَا يَدُلُّ عَلَىٰ أَنِّي أُمِرْتُ بِذَبْحِكَ. You see, I saw something in a dream which to me, it gave the understanding that I've been commanded, not that I have been commanded. You understand? مَا يَدُلُّ, what reflects or demonstrates to me that maybe I've been commanded. So that's, and here you've got a tafsir of Ibn Atiyah, the Muharrar al-Wajiz, where he mentions وَإِنَّ هَذَا, that this thing يحتمل أن يشير إلى ما في القصة من امتحان واختبار. So it could be referring to that بشدة. ويحتمل, and it's possible that يشير إلى ما في القصة من where is it, من سرور بالفدية وإنقاذ من تلك الشدة. Okay, so it could be that this, what is it that is a bala'un mubin, that what was a test could be it could be this. He's saying obviously because many people, and I'm going to come to that, many people historically went with that it was the actual test. Or it could be that this now relief that he had was very testing for him. Why was this relief testing for him? Because there's the understanding that he could have sacrificed, he could have murdered his own son. So this was very testing upon him. Now, it's important to understand this. Why? Now, first of all, why did people then, if I'm saying this, why have people historically said something different? Now, you have to understand that a lot of our early Islamic thought has been influenced by the Israeliyat, by Jewish Judeo-Christian narratives that have been floating. So many early Muslims took things from early Jewish scribes like Ka'b al-Ahbar, Wahb ibn Munabbih, all these people. And obviously in the Judeo culture, this is what they thought had happened. So people are accepting that, look, there was this incident with Abraham, but where did this come from? Where did the commandment? Was it just something he saw himself? What did God tell him? Now I know in the Bible they say it as, oh, God told him, but not in the Quran. The Quran never said that, and Allah could have said that. It was so easy to say we told him sacrifice, And then we found him to indeed be somebody who lives up to his word, so we told him stop. But Allah never said that, you see. Now the question is, look, I understand that most Muslims have been brought up with this kind of a belief. But in all honesty, that belief is an absurdity. You are saying that God is asking a father to murder his child. Why? Because it will make him happy. I mean, that is utterly beyond any level of rationality. It is so absurdly sadistic. Because what is it that you are actually saying God is asking him to do here? Now, people will say, yes, but he stopped him before he did it. Now, but that's similar to like a mock execution then. You know, yeah, we're going to just scare you into, you're going to think we're going to execute you, but then we're going to actually stop. A mock execution, which are some of the most horrific, traumatizing incidents that could ever happen. I mean, from a psychological perspective, if you read the studies on mock executions and what they do to people psychologically. So, in all honesty, I find this belief, even though I'm not, look, I understand Muslims, many Muslims believe it, but this belief in and of itself upon true inspection is blasphemous. But I understand the fact that most people just haven't questioned it. It's not that they, you see, they're following it without actually thinking about it. Like they've just heard it since they were kids and they never really thought about it. What does it actually mean? And they just, yeah, it just makes sense. Yeah, it's just a trial and then God saved him. But when you think about it, what is it that you're actually saying? You're saying that God gets a kick out of saying to a father who just about had a son that, you know what, go kill your son for me. Slit his throat. Because why? Because it's going to make me happy that you do it. And then he said, nah, I'm only messing. Don't do it. Kill that sheep instead. I mean, that is utterly absurd. That does not sound like a God of, you know, of this great majesty, of the wonder, of the creator of the cosmos, the Rabbul Alameen. That doesn't sound like that kind of a God. Now, the Jewish people, why did they go? Now, you've got to understand something. Jewish people, the Israelites, when they came to worshipping one God, the name they chose for God was Yahweh. You have to understand that Yahweh was already a God that existed in the Middle East. Yahweh is not the name of God, by the way. Many people may not know this. Yahweh is from the house of El. El is also another name that Jewish people call God. Now, El was another God that existed, and he had a household of gods. He had like his children and so on. Now, in his household was Yahweh. Yahweh was the God of war. Now, he has a consort, by the way, Yahweh does. But what happens is the Israelites choose this term for God. And they refer to Yahweh now, the ultimate God, as Yahweh. Now, I'm not saying that's necessarily, I'm not saying that is a problem per se. I feel that people can do that. It's not, words are developed like that. They do kind of evolve over time. The issue is when you do that, you will carry over some baggage. Like, let me give you an example. Imagine the Vikings who have this god of war, Odin. Now, imagine they become monotheists and they start to refer to God, the ultimate God, as Odin. Now, what would happen is naturally the character of Odin that they previously knew as Odin will spill over in some aspects in this new narrative. It will have to, because when they speak of Odin, even if they block out the bulk of it, 5% will seep over, at least, this war element. Now, Yahweh is this not treacherous, but this brutal character of that existed in the Middle East of this god of war that is vengeful, he's about killing, he's about exterminating, he's about making sure, those that oppose him, destroying them. This comes over into their monotheism. So when they speak of Abraham, to them it makes sense that, yeah, Yahweh could have said this, you see. But to us, that isn't the case. Right? So Yahweh is not Allah. He's not God. And Allah keeps reminding us He's Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. So this is not the true image of God. And to say that God wanted a man to kill his own son, to slit his throat in front of him, just because it will give God a kick, like he will get happy out of it. This is, subhanahu wa ta'ala amma yasifun, as Allah says in the Quran. Now, it's never acceptable, honestly. And I understand that many Muslims do believe that because they've just been brought up with the Judeo-Christian stories and they're just going with it. And they're not really thinking about it. It's like many of those beliefs. It's like when I grew up with it, I didn't really think about it. I just accepted it. And it's only upon introspective kind of analysis that a person thinks that, wait a minute, this doesn't actually make sense. And what's interesting, the scholars of the past do... I have scholars. Sometimes you got... The scholars of the past are discussing all these things on it, like Fakhruddin al-Razi and all these other... They're debating all these things on it. Like they'll say, so, like they'll discuss this. Does this mean that the dream that he saw it, or did it come to him in a vision? Like, was it? So they'll discuss this, and then they'll discuss all these other things. Like, okay, so there's the ruling that can God instruct something and abrogate it before he even has you act it out? Can God? This also shows, it shows the interesting mas'ala of ahkam, rulings can come via dreams. Another interesting point, it covers the topic. This is them. Yeah, interesting point here that we can discuss. Rulings also come at nighttime or during sleep, and they come at... And the elephant in the room is a cha-cha-cha. So God wanted a dad to kill his son to get a kick out of it. Does anybody want to discuss this? None of them discuss that. They'll just go, yeah, so it's really interesting. Is there anything else on the agenda? Anything? They're like, anything? No? Oh, yeah, there is. There's a linguistic term we need to debate. Why was the word, fadaina used? What was the sheep? That's an interesting point. Before we conclude, what was the sheep that was sacrificed? Dhibhan azim. Point. Was it a ram? Was it a... Alwa. Nobody's discussing the fact that, wait a minute, God said, kill your son. I mean, what, to make me happy? Whoa. Can somebody discuss this? Nothing else? All linguistic? Any grammatical? All grammar done? Okay, so we've concluded this chapter. Nothing more to discuss here. Right, so I think, look, I'm not blaming Muslims who believe in this. Look, this belief is blasphemous, but I'm not saying to individual Muslims, you guys are blaspheming, because I genuinely don't think that they've thought about it. I think they've just been brought up without, like the way I was brought up with this belief, I never really thought about it. So if somebody said to me, oh, you're blaspheming, unlike the other issues where people are saying things like the Prophet bedded a child, that is clear blaspheming because they're just pushing an agenda there. But here, these are old narrative stories that they've heard since they were kids. And they're just regurgitating them without actually thinking over what they're saying. But they just, they're not really thinking what they're saying. And if they think about the story, they will then, If they carry on, like I got into a discussion with someone about it, and they said, yeah, but what's wrong with it? God said, in fact, he said to me, no, if you think about it, God never said to him, murder your son, because the son agreed. God said to him, assist him in committing suicide. Oh, God, the euthanasia advocate. I found that so funny. I never said kill him. I said convince him you're going to kill him, then assist him in suicide. Oh, God, the technical barrister. Oh, that's so funny, man. That's so. But yeah, so that is the point. And then yes, because it became a moral, people needed the moral from the story that somebody. So they just took the moral and ran with it without actually contemplating the details of the story. I hope that's of some help. Right. Somebody said, Rami Nazim said that, look, I hear you and it logically checks out, but how the hell are there no plethora of primary sources resonating with this view that it's out of the... I absolutely agree, because, and I'll tell you why, because in that day and age, first of all, the material that they were kind of just digesting was coming from Israeli sources, where it's fine, it makes sense because that is Yahweh, the god of war. It makes sense since Baal and these other gods used to ask for sacrifices, Yahweh asked for it, but then he stopped him. It was just a test of his willpower, and it makes sense for them. Now, Muslims picked up on it, but you see, this is what I was saying. It's crazy what the era allows you. So Muslims kind of picked up on it, and they just accepted it on the grounds that, look, well, because God didn't let him carry it out, it's okay. Maybe he did say it. And they just ran with it. And I suppose you have to look at the environment, 1300 years ago. Because there's nothing from the Prophet that is established that the Prophet said that. Remember, the Prophet gave you the Quran. He never said that in there. He could have easily said it. This could have easily been God's word saying that, yeah, we told him to do this. Didn't. But people accepted it because their environment was so brutal that to them it became acceptable that, okay, maybe God did test someone like that. And you see, this is another problem. When your environment is so harsh, you kind of project, you are a product of your environment, and you project it also onto religion, and you project it onto God in some ways. And this is why it's interesting that in modern times now, when there is more affluence and prosperity, how people have revisited the understanding of God and stripped it away from these environmental factors that people had kind of bolted onto it. That because the environment is harsh, God must be harsh. So, yeah, I hope that makes sense. Somebody said God was asking, are you willing to sacrifice that which is most beloved? Yeah, that's the moral of the story that Muslims kind of went with then. But the truth is that, look, when you break it down, what is God asking? God is setting up a mock execution. He's asking a father to kill, to murder his own baby. That God would never do that. Never. That's just crazy. That's just absolutely crazy. It doesn't matter. Like, that kind of a God is, he's got a problem, because if he says, yeah, but I'm just doing it to test if you love me. But that kind of a love is unnecessary. That's like God is asking you to murder someone. He says, but I'm only messing. I'm just messing with you. That's just messing with the brain. That's you turn someone crazy like that. If you ask somebody, and even if they were up to it out of sheer love for you, to murder their own child, can you imagine what the damage that would do to that individual? So it's not from God, and Allah clearly did not say it was from him, and he could have. So that to me ends the debate.